So, silenced voices. So what I want to talk about is how I use an integrative approach to dealing with silenced voices, and by that I mean how internalized homophobia and oppression seeks to silence our voices as therapists, as GSD therapists, and obviously importantly silence the voices of our clients. And importantly what we do with that really, and how we attend to those voices. So really it's about silenced voices and how we hear them roar. I was going to do my subtitle, but I thought it was a bit pointless. And really this work came out of when I did my masters, and I was looking at self-disclosure of therapists, but I was thinking then more about self-disclosure as the gay man working with heterosexual clients. So I kind of made this a bit different in terms of working with GSD clients. Just to position that, I'm going to predominantly talk about gay male experiences, because I'm talking from my own experience a lot, so that's kind of where my focus is going to be, but there are areas obviously where it extends into other things as well. So first of all, thinking systemically, most of us grow up in a heteronormative environment. We grow up taking on the expectations, norms, actions of heterosexuality. Not just of our generation. Of the generations before. I'm wondering at what point that will start to be, who the hell are those people? But luckily you're all old enough to understand what I mean. And I also thought she was a sour-faced old cow. Anyway, so we take on board the ideas, speaking systemically, of generations previous to us, and these are all passed down, and we absorb them, and we work with them, and we take them all in. So if we're all kind of born into a heteronormative environment, this was mine. This was my little microcosm of heterosexual normativity.
Was that you on the couch with the shirt on?
Yeah, this is me, obviously. So yeah, I was taken actually in 1977, the summer of the Great Heat Wave. Those of you who remember it. It's kind of interesting because, you know, at that age, obviously it was a time for me of innocence. I remember it fondly, I remember it well. My family was a very close, happy, as you can tell, family. My dad's teeth aren't as goofy as they look in that photo, I've got to say. There you go. So I guess the point is anyway that even at that age I was starting to take on board. I knew I lived in this family, I knew I was loved, I knew that it was safe and secure, and it was my only experience of family, my only experience of was living in that kind of environment. But I do remember as well thinking about not only how families work, but how we think about these ideas of heterosexuality. There's also the idea about gender and gender roles, and I do remember very clearly liking Peter and Jane, and reading those books and learning to read with those books, and teaching my little sister to read with those books. But even then, I mean, I don't know, sometimes I look back and think, am I imposing a memory? But I seem to remember reading and kind of going, I don't know, I don't understand this. Why does Jane get to cook with Mummy? I want to cook with Mummy. I don't want to be in the garden gardening, that's boring. I don't want to do boy things. So right from a very early age, there was this sense of learning about the world around me in a very prescriptive way, but kind of feeling a little bit separate from that. And I think the interesting thing for me looking at these books as well, whilst it was very much about roles in terms of physical activity, there was also this sense of how emotionally we're meant to behave on a gender-based level. So this idea of boys don't cry was quite a strong message I took as a child, and that it was okay for girls to emote, but that was seen as a weakness rather than something that's actually kind of powerful. So as well as kind of gender roles, I also growing up took on ideas about sex and relationships. Again, some of you will remember some of these references and some of you won't.
I don't remember the top one.
You remember this one?
Yeah.
You don't remember the Nescafe advert?
Yes, of course!
Yeah. Nescafe Gold Blend. Yeah.
Yes!
Gareth Hunt.
Gareth Hunt before that one. Yeah, okay.
That says a lot, doesn't it?
But again, what was important about these messages was not just the fact it was kind of male-female coupling. The messages were around longevity, monogamy, faithfulness. So again, all these very strong ideas about how we have relationships and what they look like, and what is okay and what is not okay. Again, thinking about my family, for example, divorce just wasn't something we did. It was all about longevity of relationships, and you just stuck with it no matter what. So kind of expanding this a little bit and thinking a little bit more academically. Burnham and Harris came up with this idea of the coordinated model, management of meaning model. What this does is seek to explain and understand how we fit within our wider cultural situation. So they were talking about how within any conversation that we're having in a relationship, that conversation is within the context of the relationship is within the context of the wider family unit, and so it goes on. And there are very strong messages that come down from the top levels which feed into us. It kind of filters down into us, and all these higher levels that are above us filter down into us as individuals. I don't like their diagrams, so I did one on my own. And it's this downward function which seeks to define the me for all of us. So all of these ideas now, it's obviously meant to be just a representational model. I don't know whether race and ethnicity would sit above class or whether it's the other way around. It doesn't really matter. The idea is that it's just about how wider cultural norms inform us and work downwards. When I was putting it together as well, I was kind of curious about gay community, and I wanted to put it on there. And I thought, first of all, what do I mean? What is the gay community? Do I mean Old Compton Street or Canal Street? Is that the gay community? Is Hebden Bridge a gay community? The local lesbian rambling association? I don't know. There's all kinds of things that we could use to define a community. But what was kind of interesting as I was thinking about it was I wasn't quite sure where it fits in that model in terms of for myself, because I think for many of us, for me, when I first came out and that family unit, that ideal family unit that I had completely disintegrated, the gay community took the place of my family, and I think that's can be an experience for many people coming out. It can also be your neighbourhood. I mean, now that my family connections are made again, I kind of have a gay community that's a neighbourhood, kind of. Anyway, so it's just interesting to think about that. And I think the interesting thing is, as well as heteronormative ideas that come down from heterosexual or the normal society, the gay community has its ideas as well, and it feeds into whether we should be monogamous or not monogamous and all these kind of issues. So really what I'm trying to think about is just how all of these external ideas feed into us as human beings. But this model helps us to understand not only how the world, how society explains who we are, it also talks about what we're not, and it very much defines the other. Again, some of you will know who that man is. Most of you maybe won't. He was James Sanderson. He was the Chief Constable of Greater Manchester through the 80s. One of the most despicable men I've ever met in my life. Deeply, deeply homophobic and horrible person. Close friend of Margaret Thatcher, which kind of says everything you need to know. And during the 80s...
And his daughter was a lesbian.
His daughter was a lesbian, yeah.
It's worth remembering.
Karma.
Yeah, absolutely. But during the 80s, wasted a lot of money and resources on policing the gay community, which meant rather than protecting us from violence, raiding pubs, having us arrested, going down the canals and sending plainclothes officers down there, doing all that kind of good stuff. So I guess the point is, society not only tells us who we are, it tells us who the other is. And for those of us who feel like we're the other, from that very early age reading Peter and Jane, I felt like the other, this starts to inform who I am and how I identify and kind of what I am as a person. So systemically, all that's going on outside of us, but I think the important thing is that we start to internalize these ideas. So all of these things that are happening from a very early age, we start to absorb, we start to internalize, and Keith kind of touched on this in his far more erudite examples than I'm going to give. But the basic idea is that we start to take on the values ascribed to us in our sexuality. And these ideas come from our friends, they come from the courts, they come from government, church, school, TV, family history. It's actually massive. When you stop and think about it, it's just pervasive, it's everywhere. There's no escape from any of it. So it's kind of not surprising that we absolutely do absorb these things. And I think, certainly again from my experience growing up, these messages that I was absorbing about being the other was very much that my sexuality was less than the normal sexuality. And for me, what was interesting looking back on all of this is that at best we were funny. The best I could hope for was to be a clown, was to be one of these people. And because they were around at the time, you could kind of say, oh well, you know, there was representation, but there was only representation of gay sexuality when sex was removed from the equation. These people were asexual, utterly asexual. Any hint of them actually having meaningful relationships. And the sad thing is, I could have put Frankie Howard up there, I could have put Charles Hawtrey up there, I could have put any number of people up there who've made a living entertaining the world.
Even Graham Norton today.
Right, yeah.
He's still
asex,
Yeah.
So it still goes on. But then also, as I was looking at this, I was thinking, do you know what though? As much as that's a negative image, and I grew up with that negative image, at least it was an image, at least I knew the gays existed. I don't know where the lesbians were. And at that point, the B's and the T's, not even the fact they were invisible, it was kind of almost like a negative existence. It was just, absolutely non-existent. So I don't know, you know, in terms of when we're working with clients, from my experience of growing up internalising these negative images, I've internalised negative images, what it's like for a bisexual or transgender person to internalise nothingness, how does that kind of impact on us and how we work? I don't know. And the other side of this, again, growing up, so we have these kind of comedy images, we have these safe, clean, antiseptic gays who were amusing. If we weren't that, we were that, which was the perverts. So we were then dirty, we were disgusting, we were cottaging, we were paedophiles, we were all these things. So there was nothing in the middle. So for me as a young boy, in the 70s, obviously very young, I didn't represent, none of this represented me. I didn't fit into any of this. I didn't know what was going on. But what it did leave me with was a very, very deep sense of shame. And I carry this box of shame with me even now. I'm 40 years old. I have done some self-reflexive work over the years, a little bit. I've thought about a lot of these kind of things, but I still experience shame. And this manifests itself. I come out on a daily, I think we all do, we all come out on a daily basis in lots of little ways. We'll talk to people. I live an out life, I live with my partner, I'm out at work, I'm out everywhere. And that's very much a statement that I need to make. And if I meet someone I don't know, I will, as quickly as I can, refer to Kevin or my husband, or I will do something to let people know, because I can't bear people not knowing. But if somebody says to me, oh, so you're gay then? I will blush. If somebody asks me that direct question, even to this day, I blush. And I hate it. I absolutely hate it about myself. But it's such an ingrained response that I carry with me from those days. Slightly satisfying in the world. But that's how we feel. So this is how we kind of start to internalise the systems around us. So I guess the idea is that we start to create roadmaps internally of the world around us based on the information we've got from the world around us. I'm kind of again picking up on some of what Keith was talking about. As we develop these maps, the idea kind of is that we start to split off. It doesn't matter about the details of this, it's just an example of, this is Fairbairn's example of object relations. A little bit complicated, but just the idea is that we have painful parts of ourselves, we don't like them, so we split them away, put them away somewhere where we don't have to think about them very much. And then again, at its most basic level, what we're looking for then in a relationship is somebody who's either got kind of a similar experience of that split, so we can validate that, or we look for somebody who's got the opposite, so you know, we may look for a very masculine person to be with, or whatever it might be, but we're kind of connecting with the other person's internalised stuff as well. I mean, the interesting thing is, though, that as with most of what we look at, these ideas and models were all developed around a heterosexual model of development and of relational relating. And it's just interesting to think about how it changes and if it changes and what the differences are for same-sex couples. Or even more interesting when we introduce a third or fourth person into that mix as well, and what starts to happen to these object relations and how we start to deal with them. So if we've got internal models of sexuality which are negative, which we I still have somewhere this idea of this mincing queen or this dirty pervert, and I'm in a relationship with someone, it's about how, if that relationship starts to struggle, if there's external pressures, internal pressures, do I start to ascribe that, project that idea into the other, and then criticise and abuse them for being this internalised version of herself? So if I have a negative view of gayness, how do I relate to another gay, I guess is the question. And maybe it's about, how do we project negative associations into the other. So we start to then see problems in relationships, we start to see relationships struggling, and I think case examples of the casework that he's done showed that really well. But linked to all of this still is this sense of shame. So we're in a relationship with somebody and we don't have a voice. So all of my life growing up, the message was silence. Don't make a fuss, don't be gay, don't talk about it, and if you are, don't make a fuss. And I remember even, when things got better with my parents and we kind of reconciled and it was great, they wanted to do great things. Even then, I was quite political, I was very militant, so it was around the time of Section 28, so I was out marching and getting arrested and throwing paint at statues and doing all that good stuff. And my mum's response was, why do you have to make a fuss? Why can't you just get on with it? Why do you have to let everybody know? Why do you have to wear a badge? Saying. And it's just this real sense of, again, the silenced voices, that oppression works, oppressive systems are in operation, whether it's to do with our race, our class, our sexuality, they operate to silence us and then blame us for being silenced. And this is kind of how it works. For us as relationship therapists, it's attending to that within the relationship. So you have two people in a relationship or more in a relationship, and they've both got silenced voices. How the hell do we help them then sort things out? The point of therapy surely is talking. And if they don't have the language, if they're not able to talk, if they've never learned how to communicate emotionally, then how do we do that? And then not only have we got what's going on within the relationship from one partner to the other, we've got the fact that the relationship is existing in an external environment. So we exist in a world which privileges heterosexual, monogamous relationships. They're number one, and that's what we should all aspire to, and that's what we should be doing. So if you're into kink, or if you're into polyamory, never mind if you're into a same-sex relationship, how do we help clients understand that and deal with the pressures that the external world is pushing onto them? Our lives, our experiences are diminished, they're reduced and seen as less than. So really it's about how we help clients, and this is really important for me in therapy, negotiate their queer world in a heterosexual world. If you fancy a laugh, Hetero Awareness Month, absolutely amazing. So they have Heterosexual Pride Month, because obviously heterosexuals are so oppressed. They need to express themselves, so they've got all these great posters, so worth a look. So for us then it's about how we negotiate our lives and how we create a queer road on a heterosexual map. So it's about working with clients. I'm thinking about the clients that I worked with earlier this year, where one of them wanted to be queer in the sense of being a bit open and the sex that he wanted to have and all of those things, and his partner wanted to live in far more heteronormative, picket fence, monogamous style. So how do you help couples cope with that tension in a relationship? So even as I said earlier on, within the gay community, whatever that means to any of us, there are strong assumptions about whether one-to-one monogamous relationships are the right way to do it. Is gay marriage a good thing for us or not? Why do we aspire to marriage? And there's also the idea, for me, which I think is really important, that what we've achieved we have now been granted rights. We haven't got those, they're not inalienably still ours, because any right that's been given to us by definition can be taken away. So it suits the political ruling classes at the moment to allow us to be equal to them, rather than understanding the political power structures that maintain the differences in the first place. So for me, working in therapy is an inherently political act when you're working with GSD clients, because what we're trying to do is address some of those power imbalances, rather than say, yes, you can have a nice heterosexual life, or what is that? Why do you want it? Why do you want that in the first place? So that's kind of what's important. And this is also important when it comes to intersectionality. So, as I said at the beginning, I'm talking from a white, gay male, a reasonably able-bodied point. There are lots of other things going on here, and particularly, it comes up for me quite a lot this, but you know, what my experience is of working with gay couples in Northwich compared to what it's like working with gay couples in the centre of London. It's a massive difference. So we need to understand the other pressures that are going on at the same time around class, around money, around race, and all these issues as well. So we're therapists, we're doing therapy. So what do we bring to therapy? Well, we bring our shit with us. We're therapists, we're not perfect in any way. I've still got my box of shame, so when I'm working with clients, it's about understanding my silenced voice. For me, it's very much about understanding my counter-transferences. So all the ideas I have that I inherited from my mum, particularly about monogamy, faithfulness, longevity of relationships, if I'm working with clients who are going, no, I want to fuck around and I want to do this and I want to do that, how am I reacting to them? What feelings am I having? So whether you call that counter-transference or definitions, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. The point is, it's attending to my silenced voices, the things that I find difficult to talk about. And the important thing and where I'm getting to this whole presentation really is about managing my internalised homophobia so that I can disclose appropriately and help the clients explore their queer role. I don't think it's about whether we should disclose, I think it's about how and when. I think as GSD counsellors working with GSD clients, it's about how and when. I believe a lot of good can come from positive modelling and appropriate self-disclosure. In terms of thinking about my sexuality, my journey to an open relationship, so I have slayed my own demons of that, my exploration of kinkiness and all of the things that have gone with that. So it's about kind of, as I say, positive modelling. It's about being able to say there is a way of being in the world that is okay, and it's okay to be messed up by it, it's okay to be okay with it. Obviously, it's always with an eye to ethics, it's always with this has got to be for the need of the client, not because I feel like I need to work out my stuff, that's what my therapy is for. And the other thing I think that's really important, that if, as I disclose and what I'm disclosing, isn't about saying, I'm perfect, look at me, I'm the same as I can do this and you can't, because there's a real danger there. It's about being realistic and honest and open about when it goes wrong and when it doesn't go wrong. And coming back to this idea of kind of the political world that we're in and what's going on around us, what happens in therapy doesn't happen in a bubble. So what goes on for that hour in that room, or the hour and a half, whatever happening, your client's going to leave that room and go back to their lives, and they could be having a really tough life. So it's always thinking about, if we're going to unsilence the voice, if we're going to hear them roar, well, is it safe for them to roar? How did they roar? When did they roar? What is it that they're saying and who they're saying it to? So we need to kind of attend to the very real political and social situations which our clients are in. So it's always about, for me, self-disclosure I think is the right thing to do, unsilencing my voice to help clients unsilence their voices in a way that the client is comfortable and safe with, and using that space to help them explore their world. Because the idea then is that what's going on here starts to feed up, and then we get this upward movement, so that we eventually have a really happy world and we all live together like on the Coca-Cola advert.